Hello, everyone, and welcome to the StayMates Education Series. Our first webinar in this series, Better Email Marketing, How to Stand Out in Cluttered Inboxes. I'm Tony Della Maria, the Vice President of Marketing Solutions at StayMates, and joining me today is my colleague, Corey Kozad. Before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items to review. Today's presentation will last 60 minutes. Please feel free to submit a question at any time by typing a message in the Q&A box. If we are able to address all questions during the presentation, one of us will follow up via email within the next few days. Should you experience any technical difficulties, please send a message in the Q&A box or call us at 800-553-8878. A copy of the presentation slides and the on-demand recording will be available shortly after today's webinar. I also want to bring to your attention the next webinar in this series. On June 30th at 12:30 p.m. Central, Mariah Obadzinski will present how a call to action strategy can improve your marketing ROI. You can find more information and register for this webinar on our website at www.staymates.com/webinars. Now I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, Corey Kozad. Corey joined the StayMates team in 2020 as an account executive. He brings over a decade of digital marketing experience, having led enterprise initiatives in industries such as e-commerce, manufacturing, higher ed, and healthcare. He is a Google AdWords and Bing advertising certified. He holds a BA in communications with a theater minor from the University of Iowa, and he earned his MBA from St. Ambrose University. Corey is passionate about helping clients set goals, measuring KPIs, and connecting with their audiences throughout their conversation experiences. A sports fanatic, he enjoys fantasy baseball in his free time. And with that, I'll hand it over to Corey. Welcome, Corey.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. Really appreciate you guys joining us today. Today, I get to talk about one of my favorite topics, email marketing. And it's so amazing because, like everything in digital, there's so many things to measure, and it's one of those things that, email's not going away. And today I hope to introduce to you a number of reasons why that is. And one of the reasons, as we see here on the slide, we're all bombarded with messages all day, every day, right? We get 4,000 to 10,000 ads a day, and nearly 60 billion junk emails are sent out every day as well. So this webinar is basically trying to focus on how do we cut through all that noise, all those emails that we get, all those ads that we get, and how do we reach our clients, our customers, our prospects' inboxes in the most efficient and effective way that we can, knowing that they're going through the exact same experience that we all do. So this webinar is going to cover the following kind of key topics: design and content, relevance and frequency, email analytics and ongoing optimizations, integration with all digital marketing initiatives within the organization, and many more topics kind of throughout. So when I came into email marketing about 8 years ago, people at that time kept on saying, email marketing is over, it's dead. We need to start looking for other channels, other avenues to reach out to our clients and prospects. But I just want to reiterate that that's totally not true. It's actually bigger than it's ever been. And I hope to show you just a few reasons why that is. So about 92% of adults in the United States use email. It's hard to imagine somebody who doesn't use email. And as far as those people who have email, 61% use email daily, according to a number of different research firms. As far as worldwide usage goes, over the last couple years, email has continued to increase in the number of users, and it's growing about 3% every year. So next year, we anticipate around 4.1 billion users of email. And so, it's not one of those things where email is slowly starting to go on a decline. It's actually continually increasing. As far as the overall usage, every industry is utilizing email marketing. It's not limited to, online retailers or just higher ed. It's across the board. And one of the key components about email marketing it's starting to just improve its overall usage, in my opinion, is the acceptance of mobile devices. And mobile has overtaken what used to be kind of a dominated market by webmail and desktop. It's really the go-to device kind of across the board. So email marketing on mobile devices is bigger than ever. There's a few top ESPs that really kind of dominate the market, not just in the United States, but really across the world. And the list here that I'm showing, so MailChimp, Salesforce, Adobe Marketo, and many others, right? They really are kind of like the key enterprise level players. But we also know that there's, there's certain niches within each industry. So this isn't an all-encompassing list. As far as like the large enterprise level platforms go, these are kind of the top players. So I get a lot of questions kind of around, how does email marketing compare to kind of pre-pandemic conditions versus kind of what we're all going through today? As far as what was, has been reported in a number of different reports over the last couple of years, we know that we are all spending a lot more time each day checking email. One organization, Adobe, they've done some research and they're saying that around 5 hours a day is what we tend to spend on email. So it's one of those things that, we're checking email in the morning when we wake up, we're checking email throughout the workday, we're checking email in bed at night, like we never stop checking our email. And so the following slides that we get into are talking about how do we maximize the efficiency of email, knowing that it's such a cluttered inbox. Well, some of the things that we know today, or at least before the pandemic, are that work emails, they tend to be opened much more frequently for obvious reasons. We know that only 25% of email offers from brands are considered interesting or compelling enough for an end user or any sort of audience to actually open up and engage with that email. So 25% is a pretty low number, right? So you really got to find those ways to really make that connection with people to drive that up. Some of the top reasons why people don't open up email include the frequency. Tends to be kind of the leading annoyance as far as the report goes. People utilizing incorrect marketing data about their email recipients, such as the wrong name, the wrong product, and so forth. People tend to send the wrong offers. A lot of things in email marketing, right? They're all about these different data points. And so making sure that all those data points are accurate, they're flowing into your ESP correctly from your CRM, and being able to utilize those in the correct manner. And sometimes people just kind of fall short in that regard. Another one of the top annoyances are just poorly written or very wordy messages, right? So due to the amount of time that people spend on emails, they don't have as much time as they would have in the past, maybe to actually dive into a really long, volume-packed email. But also like some of the recommendations that people are sending out as far as, this topic is of interest to you based on like what we know about you, but sometimes they miss the mark. So really it's all about relevancy, making sure that we're sending out emails that really connect with our end users. And so like, I wanted to say that, we don't necessarily know how exactly email has changed since the pandemic. I've read reports in which, people are sending out more emails at times. Other times people have really kind of gotten nervous about what to say, what to send, how often to send. So some people have pulled back. So I wanted to give our audience on this webinar today the opportunity to present, what are you seeing on your end? So if you wouldn't mind taking out your cell phone, you can text the number right there and just let us know. And we can share this information out with you after today's webinar. But it's just interesting to know, what are you seeing in your inbox personally? So I'll give folks a few more seconds here to chime in. Feel free to go ahead and text that. It's a very quick, easy kind of method. Yep. And so at this point, it doesn't look like people have really been receiving less email. So some of the early reports that I've seen are somewhat accurate from that regard. People are saying that they're trying to communicate more with their prospects, trying to be more empathetic, letting them know how they can be a utility to them, and so forth. So I'll move on to the next. Okay, so this one, I wanted to give you the opportunity to say, what is the overall industry looking like? our organizations that you work for, are you guys as an organization sending out more emails, or you feel like you're sending out less email? I anticipate that some organizations probably have taken a step back, which is totally understandable. And again, some of it comes down to different work conditions. You're no longer sometimes in the office. Maybe the work process workflow has changed a little bit. It's interesting to see how different industries are handling it differently. But again, we'll summarize this information that you guys are providing today, so that when you get the deck, that you can actually kind of see, how are things changing. Okay, sorry about that. I had a slight delay. So one of the reasons why I like email marketing is because it comes down to you're reaching the very right people with the right message at the right time with the right content. And in a world that used to be really dominated by traditional marketing, now it's so much different. As somebody drives by in their car, they see a billboard, they have about 5 seconds to really absorb that message. And so, to me, I find a lot more value in today's age being able to reach people on their mobile devices any time of the day when they're ready for that message. And so, this kind of goes back to the point that you can't expect the things of the past necessarily to translate as effectively as some of these new modern technologies. And that's where I get so excited about email marketing. It provides users the opportunity to be seen and heard. We can all do that, right? But it's by the right person with the right content in those messages at exactly the right time. And that's the beauty of email marketing and other digital technologies. Someday, when we're advanced in the world, in the time maybe like 2100, it'll be a John Anderton Minority Report type scenario where you're walking through a mall or an airport, and those out-of-home marketing messages are actually speaking to you. They know exactly who you are, what your interests are, and they give you the right message at the right time. But clearly we're not living in that time at this point, but someday maybe. So some of the key attributes to email marketing that I wanted to talk about is really the overall process to consider, especially internally at your organization. And so I like to provide people kind of a quick checklist just to refer to. And there's really 3 phases of email marketing. There's the pre-send phase, there's the post-send phase, and then there's kind of that ongoing optimization and kind of lead generation activity that takes place. So as far as pre-send, some of the key activities, and there's probably a plethora of more that little micro moments that you could also include in here, but these are kind of the key ones that stood out to me. You need to be able to accurately define your audience and really create those robust email lists. You have to make sure that you're spending the time up front to understand what that user journey needs to look like and have a really effective conversion strategy, which outside of just the email itself, that would also include your website and your landing pages and your forms and so forth. In order to actually understand, what sort of success this email generates, you have to early on create those baseline metrics. So compare back to previous sends, similar types of emails, but really understanding those from the start and utilizing that information to outline your goals and then your KPIs. It's extremely beneficial to do that from the start so that going into each email send, what are those lead generation activities that you're looking for to really help understand what does that user journey need to look like to achieve your end result that you're looking for. And then you got to make sure that you're going in and creating the right content for the right audience, actually spending the time to develop responsive email templates, really, design-wise, really good-looking templates that really stand out, that pop. But also ensuring that you're setting up your analytics and tracking early on and that you're testing that and making sure that you're going to be able to collect all this awesome data that you're going to get and be able to report on it. And the last step, and I like to reiterate this, is testing the email. So making sure that you're spending the time to check all the different links, the different types of CTA buttons, the overall copy, the images, the entire thing. And sometimes I feel like that's sometimes overlooked in the process just because time and resources come into play. Regarding the post-send activity, I do recommend that a lot of clients create digital dashboards. And the reason for this is that oftentimes ESPs, these email marketing platforms, they tell you a lot of activity of what's taking place within the email world or atmosphere, but they don't necessarily provide you all those insights that you get from your CRM and from your website. And so being able to create like a cleaner, easier to view environment tends to play out a little bit easier when you're trying to report these successes back to your organization. It's also important that you continually monitor and report on performance. After I send out an email, I generally give emails about a week or so to actually collect all that data. You know that people, like, you send them the email, and sometimes people just don't check their email or review each email right away. Sometimes it takes a few days, and you have those laggards that'll maybe a week later go in and do some sort of click through and maybe a conversion. But I usually give it like a week or two before I really say that this email performed this way. You also have to be sure that you're always looking to identify those growth opportunities, to take the learnings from the different emails that you send out. If somebody's not clicking through, try and identify why that is and so forth. And also make sure that you're taking the time to share all that feedback with your wider team within your organization. Implementing all those changes and figuring out how it not only impacts the email folks, but also the digital marketers and the traditional marketers and so forth as well. As far as kind of the ongoing optimization goes, I think it really is important to think through sitting down, coming up with a really detailed email marketing calendar. That helps you kind of avoid too many email sends, maybe similar messages, confusing people, but also gives you time to create a promotional plan. What are you trying to drive towards? Monitoring your sender score, making sure that you're reaching inboxes. Keeping up with the latest email trends. There's a ton of reports out there, and I can provide people additional resources to look at after today. But there's some great tools that are free that'll give you some insights into, like, where do you guys need to be going? What's the next step in email? Creating that ongoing content and developing those assets, whether they be videos or images or just better content, more content, relevant content, and so forth. That also leads to continually testing and optimizing your campaign landing pages, but also your web pages. Also, like the email templates themselves, right? So sometimes you get stuck in this phase where you create this email template, it works, but then maybe it's not keeping up with the latest trends in technology. So just making sure that you're going back in and you're adding that additional CSS and other like snippets just to ensure that your email is going to perform as well as it can on every device. Also, I do recommend an annual email audit just to make sure that, are your analytics still working properly? Are you still reaching the targeted audiences? Are your nurture campaigns and automated programs performing as they should? And sometimes I think we get into this kind of phase where we set it and we almost forget it. So the top reasons why emails don't get clicked. And here are the three main reasons. It comes down to volume, relevance, and design. So email templates always must be responsive. They have to look great on every device, every platform. We know that we only get about 3 seconds. So somebody opens up your email, if it's not designed and looks great on their device and within whatever email platform that they're using, they'll go ahead and delete it, right? And so a deletion is obviously better than being marked as spam, but there's ways to just avoid that. And it really comes down to a really robust, responsive email template. Oftentimes users will just go ahead and unsubscribe from you at about a 15% rate, should the email template itself maybe not look as well as it could. But there are, as I was saying, there's a handful of tools available, third-party tools. Some are paid, some are free, but they'll be able to give you insights into, how does your email look on smartphones, on different types, Android, iOS, how does it look on Yahoo, Outlook, different email platforms. So understanding the overall design from the start is definitely key. When you think about your different templates, though, think about, what are the types of different messages that you have? There could be automated thank you messages, or you could have an annual year-end review type email template that you want. Event checklists, if you're holding a lot of events and conferences, not every template that you have needs to look exactly the same. One of the latest trends is dark mode. And so I oftentimes don't recommend to people to spend much time on this, but I want to at least give a heads up that, email is evolving. It's something where companies like Google and Yahoo, Outlook, they're investing resources behind making the email experience for their users even better. And as we know, if we're looking at emails late at night, dark mode is one of those things that if it's a little bit easier on your eye, there's no reason not to, start considering that as you start building out new templates as well. Regarding email design and the overall content, it's just vital that you think through the different email kind of templates that you have or the different audiences and trying to be consistent with your voice and your style. to set that expectation from the start as to like what an end user can experience and what can they expect from you. And there are a number of ways to do that. I'm sure everyone has, great content teams and design teams, but just thinking through like the email itself, using headings and subheadings to break up that content, especially if you have long messages, make them easy to read, make things stand out that need to stand out with bold and other sort of creative artwork. Essentially the end goal of every email, right? So everyone has some sort of idea in mind. You're trying to get somebody to take some sort of next step for the most part. Some emails are just informational, but if you're an email marketer, right, you want somebody to eventually become a lead and a long-term customer and so forth. So really thinking through what does that CTA need to look like, and then trying to find the right balance. I've seen a number of emails throughout the year that are maybe mostly images or mostly text. It's really about trying to come up with about a 60-40 balance, but more heavily tilted towards text. You're really trying to drive information, relevant information, provide that to your users. But also you don't want to make your emails too big. If you have a bunch of big image files within that email, sometimes providers like Gmail will go ahead and splice that image off just for load times, right? So if you think about search engine marketing, they tend to serve up websites and results that have a very quick load time, right? Because it's a better user experience. We all have very little time. They want to provide things as quickly as possible. And so they've actually started doing that to people's emails as well. So you want those to load as quickly as they can. And then try to limit the number of fonts that are being utilized as well. One of the last kind of just comments here is really try to take the time to personalize your emails, utilize that dynamic content. So if you have, robust information on your different audiences, a lot of good CRM data that flows into your ESP, be sure to use it and be sure that the information that you're using is accurate and just test it out. There's also a lot of great information that organizations collect. If you have sales information, information about your students, whatever you have in your different databases, try to put it to use. In the past, I used clustering models to create different kind of email segments for our organization. So the better that you understand your customers, the better you'll be able to serve them the right content at the right time. So if trying to find ways to pull in that data into your ESP and to model it and to utilize it is an extremely effective strategy. So using data is like one piece, but you can also provide the end user the opportunity for them to select what sort of information is best for them. This example here is National Geographic. This email is basically telling people, early on in the overall experience, say I just signed up for Nat Geo's emails, what do you actually want to see from us? What sort of email should we send you? And they give you the opportunity to click through. They remember that and they utilize that information for future email sends. So there's some other tactics that people can use, but trying to utilize the information that you have about your contact list and providing that relevant information is going to get you those big wins in the long run. Some other things to consider about email is just the overall images. So it's probably best to assume that your images aren't all going to load when somebody opens those up, right? So I think we're all used to having to click on images and to select to actually load those and to see those. And that's what makes the image alt text so important. So for all the images within your email itself, it's best to go in there, provide a decent description of what those images are, should somebody decide not to take the time to actually load those images. And you can get some pretty creative things going on with building out the HTML and making that alt text maybe look better or branded better. But it's something that tends to go overlooked by a lot of different organizations. Also making sure that the image sizes themselves are they're optimized for the web. They're going to load quickly. They're not larger than 72 DPI. That tends to be optimal for email just to keep that size down and the load times up there. So even though that we can't necessarily add videos, I get questions all the time. Can I stick videos inside emails? There have been some organizations over the years or third-party companies I've seen come up with some creative solutions, but they tend not to work in every different email provider. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I tend to recommend people just stick in image stills with like a play button over the top to drive the click-throughs. But the example down below in the lower right is an example I had seen from an online retailer in which The CSS and the HTML code going into emails now is so much more robust and creative. You can actually scroll through like a carousel mode within emails now. So that overall experience has improved so much more than what it used to be in the past. And one of my favorite things are animated GIFs. So they can actually provide a much better story within that email to drive engagement, to get somebody to click through. This example here is an email I received a while back from Freshly. I love their use of animated GIFs within the email. If you only have so many seconds to observe the content within the email, making it stand out and pop the best that you can is only going to serve you in the long run. And here's another example. So I had mentioned earlier, providing kind of that snapshot of the video. So you don't no longer have to use just a static image of your video if you're trying to drive the click through. You can use GIFs to kind of give people a quick preview or a snapshot of what that video is all about. I love the creativity here. It's a very long email, but I definitely read all the way to the bottom just because it was so creative. The content stood out and it was also relevant. One of the most important pieces about any email is obviously the ongoing testing and optimization. There's so many different components to emails that can be tested, everything from the subject line to the pre-header text, and also understanding the different audiences. Maybe some audience lists that you have will perform better than others. But it's amazing to know why that is and be able to make the changes necessary to maybe improve that overall performance in the long run. And sometimes it just comes down to content. But also sometimes users just have different preferences based on demographics and so forth as well. Compare your dynamic content within emails to the static content. So if you're A/B testing, if you send out one version with just static content versus another one with dynamic content, which is maybe a little bit more relevant or personalized, you tend to see a lot better performance. But it's one of those things that, test it out for yourself. Gather that data and then utilize it to make improvements moving forward. And always try out, test your links, test your CTAs, test your button designs. Little tweaks here or there or make incremental gains in the long run. And also try to send out emails on different days of the week. A lot of times people will hold off on sending emails out on Saturday and Sunday. They'll wait till Monday, and then inboxes are flooded on Mondays. And so if you're trying to stand out, try different days of the week. Don't be scared to try weekend emails. I know a good portion of people will wake up on Saturday, they'll spend a few hours before, getting moving, and they'll review a number of emails, or even on Sunday. So it's certainly worth trying and to gather that data. And going back to kind of those automated campaigns, whether they're nurture campaigns, drip campaigns, and so forth, you set them up and you assume that they're going to perform as they should. But don't forget to go back, review that data, and make those small tweaks because things change over time. Some people wonder, well, how many words is the right number of words or the character count for a subject line? And this is continually changing. But also it really depends on the specific device that people are utilizing. Sometimes on smartphones, maybe 4 words work better. On a desktop, maybe 10 words work better. As far as the overall sweet spot, according to Adobe, 7 words tends to be that sweet spot between getting a good open rate, but also driving the click-throughs. So just wanted to point that out. It's one of those things that you need to test for yourself because every industry, each audience is slightly different. But if you're looking for just that sweet spot, this is a good place to start. So throughout the last few months, I've been collecting some of the more, I guess, informational or helpful emails. And so I just wanted to share some of those with you. The whole pandemic it's one of those things that the emails that we are sending, right, they need to have that certain empathetic tone to them. They need to be extremely relevant, provide our users, our customers, our clients, some sort of utility, right? So, what can we do for them or help them in this time of need? But also being forward-looking, knowing that this isn't going to last forever. What are some messages that are pertinent to drive future sales or set future appointments to get people to enroll today and to become a student and so forth? So people have gotten very creative. One of the things I've noticed lately over the last year or so is the use of emojis. I personally have never used emojis in emails, but it's one of those things that it's a very interesting concept, right? Because we're all used to using emojis in our text messaging, instant messengers, and so forth. Bringing that life and that expression into your emails will help separate you. So if you look at some of the ones at the top here, you can get very creative. There's so many different options to use. Only about 2% of email marketers are using emojis. So if you're looking for a tactic to help stand out and separate yourselves from competitors, give that a shot. A good day will be July 17th. That's World Emoji Day. So if you're looking for a good reason to test that out, that might be a good day to try it. So what are the next steps, right? So you sent out your email, you put a lot of time into testing out your templates, understanding your audiences, creating segmented lists. And now you want to make sure that you're going to be able to track performance in the long run, right? So you can actually make those ongoing tweaks and optimizations. As I was mentioning earlier, a lot of ESPs do have some great email performance metrics built within the platforms themselves. That tends to fall short as far as providing you, what happens when somebody reaches the landing page or your website. Making sure that you're tagging all of your links. And so you can gather that information. So Google Analytics is obviously free unless you choose to get the higher paid version of it, 365. But utilizing the UTM parameters on each link and gathering that information is key because it helps bridge that gap between your email metrics, your opens, your clicks, and so forth, and provides you these are the actions that people are actually taking on your website after they click through. And so, I have some personal favorite KPIs that I've used over the years, right? Leads per 1,000 emails sent, revenue per email, the bounce rate from the site, the time on site, conversion rates, and et cetera, right? There's so many different KPIs that you can make relevant for your own organization. You just have to really take the time to figure out what's most important to you. But if you're not tracking your links right now in a very robust way, utilizing Google Analytics and UTM parameters and setting up a digital dashboard to pull all that data together in one spot will really serve you well moving forward. So automated email programs, a lot of times I think people struggle with trying to figure out, what is an automated email program versus kind of just the batch and blast, right? The one-off emails that we send, or like the emails that we send out to all of our contacts. So automated programs are very specific. They try to create those one-to-one conversations with individual users, right? Based on whatever data you have on that user, whatever activities or behaviors they take on your website. And there's a number of different types of programs that you can set up depending on your specific ESP that you're utilizing. So, some of my favorite over the years have been welcome emails. As soon as somebody comes into your database, be sure to give them a nice warm-up experience. Tell them what you'll be able to provide them moving forward and set those expectations from the start. Cart remarketing for any type of retail activity. Search remarketing is actually one of my favorites. So if somebody's searching for particular terms within your site search, pulling that data back into your ESP and utilizing that to provide very relevant custom content will only make that person click through and engage with you more. Oftentimes we may have birthdays, purchase activity. And one of my, another great thing, right? So, as you think about people trying to make decisions, whether about it's buying a car, where to go on vacation, what school to attend, it often comes down to not only kind of personal recommendations or feedback from people that they know, but online reviews. So if you can slowly increase the number of reviews that you're getting for your products and services, that's going to help drive that end result that you're looking for. Replenishment reminders, thank yous and appreciation type emails, conference and event type programs, and also form abandonment. So I know that many of the clients that we work with obviously have forms on their website, right? They're trying to generate those leads or develop those next steps. And noticing when people leave the form, right? So if they didn't quite finish it, take that data and be sure to follow up with that individual contact and let them know that you can either help or ask them what will help drive them to the next step. So why use automation? There are kind of 5 key reasons why. You can deliver those timely, relevant, personalized content messages. You get engagement around the clock, right? So even when we're at home sleeping and engaging with our families, those programs have been set up and you've taken the time to, customize, optimize, and so forth. You can let those run, but you still have to monitor those. They also continually drive that journey, right? So depending on the type of automated program you set up, you can continually think about what's that next step we want that user to take and provide that next email in the automated program. It also increases your overall email deliverability. Automated programs, just due to the fact that they're more relevant, they're more timely, they tend to increase your overall email performance. I did provide some personal results, right? So if you haven't bought into the whole idea of taking the time to set up automated programs yet, here's some data as to why that's important. So some of the emails I've sent in the past, unique open rates that I've seen, 88% better than just traditional marketing emails. Click rates, they tend to be, quite a bit better than traditional emails, 109%. Average orders per 1,000 emails sent, 137% better, because you're really speaking to that person at a more individual, personalized level. But it's also kind of a utility if you think about it, right? Because you're kind of reminding them, keeping them moving forward. So it's helpful to the end user as well. The top program that I've developed in the past, the unique open rate, it was as high as 65%. So if you think about maybe an average open rate of 20%, that's considerably better. Click-through rate of 35% versus like the normal of around maybe 5 or 10% click-through rate. You just get such gains with automated programs. And again, going back to overall deliverability, right? So as email providers and ISPs consider you as an individual email sender, if they notice that you're continually providing great emails and you're getting a lot of good opens and clicks and engagement from your email list, it's going to help you reach more inboxes moving forward as well. Multi-part emails. So mine, it's just another small tactic, right? So oftentimes, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with multi-part emails, but it's sending out the text version and the text version at the same time. And the reason why this is important is because in the past or historically, a lot of spammers tend to send out just long, either like their pictures, they don't have any text, or they're just all text. So the multi-part email will help separate you. And strangely enough, there are some people out there that they actually prefer text-only emails. They have set up their email platform to only get those. And some email clients, like, and I know this is a very small segment, but like BlackBerry in the past, right? They really only loaded well the text version of those emails. So email volume and fatigue. A lot of times people try to figure out, what's more important? Is it sending out more emails? Will that generate more leads for us and more engagement? But really it comes down to relevance, right? So if you're continually just bombarding your list over and over again without providing that kind of personalized touch, people are going to start opting out of your programs. They're going to start flagging you as a spammer. But if you're relevant, it doesn't really matter how many emails that you send, right? You're a utility for that person. They appreciate it. And I always go back to Amazon. I tend to always look at those Amazon emails because they provide me ideas, recommendations, and things that are pertinent to my life or my family. And I just find them very helpful. And so like they send out a lot of emails, but they're also very relevant. Avoid email blasting your entire contact list. Very targeted lists tend to perform better. So if you can segment your list and create different audiences with more specific content for each audience, in the long run, you're going to perform better. And there's a number of ways to kind of help get you there, right? The two image examples that are provided here they're really just giving the end user an example or setting that expectation as to what types of emails are sent out on certain days, but also letting them decide how often they want to receive your messages. So there's just a couple of small touches there that you can take to ensure that people are actually going to read your emails and engage with them. And another key metric to consider is the disaffection index. So in the past, I was trying to figure out a way, how do I really know if my emails are relevant to the end user? So this is a slightly better way to measure, that sort of success. Versus just like a normal unsubscribe rate. So you're actually looking at people who solely click through your emails just for the sake of unsubscribing so they don't get any additional messages from you. You definitely want that number to be as low as possible, right? So between like 0 and 5%, but it's always going to be greater than 0. It's probably going to be between like 1, 2, 3%. But this should provide you more realistic picture as to how valuable your emails to your contact list. Email compliance, so making sure that you're just following CAN spam, CASL, other sorts of state laws, as well as like EU laws and so forth, making sure that you're staying on top of that and that your email programs are considering those types of activities. Definitely always include the unsubscribe link in your footer. You don't want to go and send messages out without allowing people to opt out easily from those messages. So making that experience as easy as possible with no trickery, right? Don't make the font very small or hard to read. Allow them to opt out should they wish. And overall, it's definitely better to have for those folks opt out than flag you as a spammer, right? Because that's only going to hurt you long term with all the other emails that you're going to send down the road. And one of the good things on one of the previous slides, we showed that little email preference center. So giving the folks that come back to your site the opportunity to, to specify the types of emails they want to receive, the frequency of emails they want to receive. That'll also help you maintain compliance and also keep your contact list happy and engaged. The email sender reputation. So a lot of different organizations will ask, how do I know if I'm a good sender? Do end users view me as a spammer or not? There's a couple different tools that are free that you can utilize. Sender Score is a great one. You can log in, you can provide your IP address, your sender IP address, and it'll give you a score between 1 and 100. You definitely want to be most effective with your email sends and reach inboxes. Shooting for like a 90+ score is ideal, because that'll ensure that not only are you providing relevant content, but also it's keeping customers engaged and keeping you from being blacklisted and being flagged as spam in the long term. So that's kind of just a general kind of KPI that I like to keep in mind. I usually go back every month and we'll check out the sender score. Are the emails we send in still holding? Are we sending out too many emails and so forth? And over time, you kind of hit some peaks and you'll hit some lows, but it should balance out. So, as far as Staymates go, we have a great score. We're at 98. Some days we send out more emails. Some days we send out fewer emails. But the overall goal is that we want to reach inboxes with our messages and be efficient and effective with those. So we're definitely reaching that mark, and it's just an easy thing to do for an organization. Set up this report, go check it out, and then take action. Finally, one of the final, things I wanted to share is it's really just making sure that email isn't being conducted as a standalone tactic. You got to really take the time to implement email along with your other digital activities. It just makes email that much more effective when it's part of a larger strategy. So thinking about implementing display advertising to spread your brand message and brand awareness with your audience, implementing display retargeting. So if they actually come to your site from your email, continue to follow up with display advertising to hopefully drive that next step. Utilize that email content in social media across the board. Search engine optimization. So continually try to improve that information on your website, right? If your email is talking about some upcoming event, make sure that your website supports that and provides people clear next steps. And also be sure to utilize your email list, right? Email lists are valuable outside of just emailing people. You can bring those lists inside social media platforms, inside of different types of advertising platforms, so you can continually reach that audience, but you can also create lookalike audiences based off your email list. So if you're trying to drive new business, new customers, new acquisition, that's a fantastic tactic to take. So lastly, if time and resources tend to be a limiting factor with your organization, focus on the 3 big things that you can really control: the volume, the relevance, and the overall design of your messages in your emails. These are the 3 things that are going to drive the biggest results for whatever organization or industry that you're in. And with that, I think we have a little bit of time to open this up for questions.
Corey, excellent job. Thank you for a great presentation. And yes, we do have time for questions. So if you haven't done so already, please type your questions now in the Q&A box. But we've already got a couple that are in here. So without further ado, someone was asking a question. You went over the new trend in dark mode. They're asking, is that something we do on our own end, or does the device automatically flip, our ad to dark?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So some email providers like Google, you can set those preferences up within email providers. On some mobile devices, you can set those preferences up. But also, if you want to override that, right? So even though Gmail may change your email to dark mode through different CSS and media queries, you can actually control what that experience looks like. So if you want to customize your code a little bit to say, based on this device and this email provider, we want the dark mode of our email to look like this. You can definitely set that up within the code of your email structure.
Okay. Another kind of tech question. Somebody says they're using their corporate brand fonts within their emails. But since many of the ESPs don't allow for the custom fonts, they're using images instead of fonts. Will that cause issues, as you discussed, with their emails?
Yep. So in general for email, it's best to use web safe fonts, in knowing that, sometimes it's going to be outside of what your brand prefers to use, especially for, whether it be traditional or whatnot. But as long as you're trying to balance out your overall email design so that you may be using an image to represent that wording to show off that particular branded font, just ensuring that you have regular text throughout that email to kind of provide that balance. But also if you're just using images for that font or that text as well, making sure that the alt text is available behind it in case somebody chooses not to actually load that. So it could be problematic from a user experience. Should somebody not load all images within your email, it's probably not going to provide the experience that you're looking for. So I would try to stick to web-based fonts just to know that you have a safer bet at presenting maybe a better email upon open.
All right, great. A lot of the questions are technical because I think people are looking to implement right away. Can you talk a little bit about managed preferences versus just a basic unsub?
Managed preferences.
So, like rather
Yeah.
than allowing to unsub, give me some choices as to how managing what emails I might receive from you.
Yeah. So again, like the email preference center is a great thing to invest time in, right? So I've seen some that are done very creatively, some that are just very bare bones. When it comes to email lists, most organizations probably have a number of different email types that they send out, right? So your opt-out strategy should be in line with the different lists that you have. So you don't necessarily want somebody to opt out of all your lists unless they choose to, right? So unless they don't want to receive any messages from your brand as a whole. So in your email preference center, it's best to kind of outline, the different types of emails that you have with a description of, this is what this type of email means, and this is what the information is going to be that we send to you. So setting those expectations and allowing that person to, to select what is best for them tends to provide better results. As far as like unsubscribes go, right? Like, so if somebody really wants to unsubscribe, that's totally fine. But you also have people in your email list that are just dormant, right? So that you're sending them emails, they're not bouncing, but they're just not opening those up. At times in the past, I've set up automated campaigns around just kind of re-enrollment or re-engagement. So create an audience of your contacts that, maybe haven't been so engaged as of late, and try to provide maybe a more enticing promotional offer or some sort of different content type that maybe tries to entice them to engage. Usually if somebody doesn't engage with an email for a year, it's probably best just to remove them from your contact list, especially if you put them through like an automated program like that where you try to get them re-engaged.
That makes sense. One of the trends I'm seeing, and some of it's on the consumer end, but as we know, consumer trends make it to B2B eventually, is that in those preferences, they're starting to tell you the frequency of the email that you'll receive. Because I think some of the retail places, you sign up and you think you want to get the emails, but then you realize it means daily, and then you don't anymore. Yeah. So I think it's odd that I'm noticing now, or maybe I'm just, mentally looking at it, that they're telling me that this one is monthly and this one is weekly and this one is daily, which, I think is sort of the mama bear, papa bear, baby bear strategy. They're getting you to pick the middle one.
Yeah, and also Tony, to add on to that, so a lot of times, organizations still send out just kind of generalized newsletters, right? So if you you're in an industry and people just want to know more about your brand, what is your company doing, changing, new products. Sometimes like monthly newsletters, right, is kind of a generalized expectation. So the different email types are probably going to vary based on industry as well as products and services offered. So I would think through like your overall messaging strategy, think through the different types of message that you send out and the frequency in which it makes sense to send those. And sometimes they are obvious, right? And sometimes they're not so much, but creating that sort of like expectation and sharing that with an end user is certainly important.
All right. So another viewer wants to know, when you mention digital dashboards, are you referring to something within Google Analytics, a different program, or just something you personally locally manage yourself?
Yeah, so there's a number of different dashboard platforms out there. As an organization, like we certainly lean towards Google. So Data Studio is fantastic. It's a free product. You can pull in a number of different sources, and so it tends to work out pretty well. Sometimes it is limited to the number of different maybe APIs or different connectors with different platforms. But if you're looking to invest in maybe something more expensive like a Power BI or other platforms, those are certainly out there as well. And because they're not free, they've sometimes taken the time to invest in better connectors or other integration methods that are maybe limited elsewhere.
I love the questions where you can show the wheels are ticking and people are making plans. Someone wants to know, how do you connect automated emails with your search remarketing? Any tools or recommendations?
Yep. So it's not a simple thing to integrate in, right? So you have to have a database a database from your site in which you can then pass that information through to your ESP. So it does take some technical setup work to be able to achieve some of that. In the past, I had a number of different data sources feeding into the ESP that I was using at the time. So we had Agile One for clustering models. We had different types of web activity platforms or maybe a personalized content platforms that would provide some data back. The different web analytics platforms will capture that. So looking at ways in which you can export that data out and pull it into your ESP is effective. But usually most ESPs will provide some additional details into how to set up those connectors and get that information out. But it can also be very tricky at times.
Excellent. Excellent. Whoops. Okay, so I've got one. This question may be difficult to answer because it all depends, right? But do text emails perform better than those with images? You sort of covered that, but
yeah. Well, that's actually a great question. So there are certain times in which if you're trying to connect with maybe on the B2B side a client, and the salesperson has a good relationship with that client, sending a text-based email sometimes will come across as being more personal, right? So it's something similar as to if you were just to go into Outlook and send a personalized message. Sometimes those do connect better because they seem less markety or promotional. So there are times in which text-based emails will perform extremely well. But for the most part, if you're thinking about different demographics and user types within any sort of industry, most of the times people are, they're going to be using their smartphone, and the ability to customize the content and the template and the overall design and experience with HTML, I think, in my opinion, provides a better experience to an end user because it also sets them up for the experience that they can receive on your website, which is kind of that next step. But also using text-based emails, it also limits you to the number of different maybe CTA types that you can use. So if you just have a text-based link versus like a nice CTA button, sometimes one's more enticing than others, but it's certainly worth an A/B test. So if you have different ideas of emails in mind, segment your list and do a 50-50 split and send it out and kind of see what happens over a couple of them. It may be indicative of one works better than others.
Okay, so you discussed sort of removing people who weren't active, and somebody had a question. They segment their list into 3 sets: active, recently unengaged, and long-term unengaged. We only send our emails to the first 2, and we have our long-term unengaged set to after they have opened or engaged after 1 year. Is that too long, too short? They want to make sure they're not missing out on readers.
Yeah. So it kind of depends based on the industry. So, in online retail, in which, obviously new products and services, whatever, may be more frequent, I would say a year is probably a little bit too long because you've kind of lost that person at that point. Other industries, it's slightly different. So if you're creating maybe an automated campaign and you can identify the person hasn't opened or taken any sort of engagement with emails, Sometimes 6 months is more appropriate. If it's an industry in which decisions aren't made very quickly, a person has to go through a lot of different research before they finally make a decision. Sometimes a year is maybe more appropriate. So I would consider your particular audience, the industry, and then, what sort of enticements or promotional offers do you think that you can come up with to re-engage that person? In the past, offering like small offers like, $5 off is enough, and other times it's not quite enough to get that person to re-engage. So it really comes down to understanding the different audiences and what it takes to make them kind of take that next step, and then setting up those programs appropriately.
Well, Corey, I want to thank you again for an excellent presentation. We're basically out of time. For any questions that we didn't get to, we will follow up with you with an email personally in the next day or so. Don't forget our next webinar in the series on June 30th at 12:30 Central Time. That's going to be on content marketing. And finally, we look forward to seeing you again. As a reminder, following today's webinar, you will receive an email with a link to the recorded webinar so you can watch it again at your convenience and share it with your peers. Thank you again and have a great day.